Hey, what is up guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now, I did another buyer's guide the other day on the Chevy Corvette C4, and it kind of just motivated me to kind of get this content up and running again, because it's what I genuinely enjoy making within Gran Turismo 7. You know, the whole point of this game at the end of the day is all about car collections and kind of the beauty of pretty much all the cars in the game. And I feel like this is definitely one of those cars, and I feel like it's very much overlooked, especially, you know, in terms of the brand that it's from. So this here is the Ferrari 308 GTB from 1975. This is recorded on the Thursday evening from the previous week, and there was one up for sale for 166,800. You also, I believe, win this from one of the Ferrari cafe menus, quite kind of late on into the cafe menus. So you may actually have one already sat in your garage, but I can guarantee you've probably never ever touched it. So you may well be thinking, well, why cover this car of all the Ferraris in the game? You know, why this one? And I think it's because, you know, it's a more kind of, in my opinion, modest Ferrari, which might sound absolutely ridiculous, but when you kind of look at the other Ferraris we've got in the game, they're all kind of, you know, insanely powerful or really expensive classics, and this kind of just sort of sits there as if it's kind of on its own. Now, it's not the most ridiculously expensive, it's not the fastest, it's maybe not even the best looking of the Ferraris that we have in GT7. But in my opinion, this is one of the better Ferraris in the game, and I think that comes down to a few things. But before we do that, let me explain how this series works. In my car reviews, essentially what we do, we get the standard car straight out of the box with no tuning on it, and we essentially take it a hot lap around the Nordschleife layout of the Nürburgring. After that, we'll then go and modify it as much as possible and let that hit up the high speed ring. I don't actually tune the cars for them, it's purely about getting the max upgrades and the max power out of it. There's no tune involved. Sometimes I will kind of tune the downforce a little bit to make it more stable, but there's never anything kind of over the top to sort of increase speed or anything like that. So it kind of keeps it a fair middle ground for, you know, all of the cars that enter. So with that out of the way, you know, what makes this thing just so damn good in my opinion? Well, it has a single wind mirror. That's definitely, you know, something quite kind of strange, but you do kind of see it on a few Ferraris from around the 70s to the 80s. I'm not really quite sure on any, you know, of the more modern models. I'm pretty sure I've not really noticed it, but it is much more noticeable on these older ones. You know, in terms of just the quirkiness of this car, it's got that typical, what I like to call Ferrari wedge look of the time. You know, it's got that really sloped low front with quite a high rear, and obviously those typical kind of Ferrari brake lights, which kind of went around on these cars for between sort of the 70s and 80s. Even as far up to, you know, sort of like, you know, the F50, the F40 and such. And in my opinion, it's just really distinct in terms of those Ferrari looks. It also includes pop-up headlights, which in my opinion just makes any car much cooler looking. I really do wish they'd kind of bring those back, but you can probably guarantee in today's kind of car landscape it's probably not possible due to some sort of, you know, regulation when building cars, or it's, you know, safety features and such. But it really just gives off that typical kind of Ferrari of that era vibes, you know, a really kind of nice shape. You know, it's just absolutely beautiful in terms of its looks. Now, people seem to like, you know, my personal stories about these kind of cars, you know, whether I've seen them in real life or if I've got any memories from, you know, maybe previous Gran Turismos or gaming in general. And well, I do have sort of a slight story. It's just the fact that I've never really actually seen one of these at all until last year when I went to Silverstone for a GT event for the weekend. And as I parked up and turned around, all of a sudden there's a Ferrari 308 just kind of parked behind my car. And one thing that kind of strikes you straight away is just how, you know, tiny these things are, you know, compared to supercars of today. If you kind of look at the cars that sort of Ferrari, Lamborghini and all that lot produce these days, they're very kind of wide, big, kind of showy offy, flashy cars, and well, there was tons of them there, but this little 308 that was just kind of parked behind me just really kind of stood out to me. And I think, again, it just kind of goes to that typical classic Ferrari look, very kind of, you know, simplistic to today's standards, but very kind of recognizable. And I think that's what I like so much about the 308. It's not kind of in your face, it's just very kind of, you know, beautiful, elegant kind of looking, very Ferrari-esque. You know, it's not got the most insane amount of power, but it does have an amazing engine note, which I will kind of show you later. And that will kind of bring me on to, you know, performance wise, what do I think about driving this car? Well, it's an absolute handful. So I did first attempt this with a zero traction control, and I just could not get this car driving how I wanted it for the life of me. It wanted to twitch everywhere, it wouldn't grip. You know, it was just as soon as the slightest bit of throttle came on, it was kind of spinning itself around trying to get its back end out, and it became more, I guess, like a drift car than what would, you know, what you kind of imagine. So I did end up putting a single bit of traction on, which did kind of bog it down in terms of its power, but it did give it that kind of extra drivability. So if you want to drive this car for its drivability, then that's definitely not its strong point. Speed wise, it's okay. I mean, on that big back straight was hitting around about over 160 miles an hour, which is actually very kind of impressive for a supercar out of, or sports car out of 1975. The brakes, they're not great. They're very kind of, you know, you have to brake a lot earlier than you think just to kind of get it slowed down enough to get through the corners. Like I said, I've kind of touched on drivability and the handling. So what makes this Ferrari so, well, special to me? And I think it's just, like I said, it's kind of a mix between its looks and when it comes to the power, like, yes, it's not the most powerful, but that kind of just gives you a lot of room to kind of learn in. And I think that's the thing, you know, in my opinion, because it's so kind of tough to get used to, I feel like it's the kind of car you can just sit there for hours on hours, just lapping, having fun in, you know, a car that's moderately powered to today's standard. Obviously, you know, back in the day, it was probably an absolute ton of horsepower, you know, 200 odd brake horsepower in 1975, you know, for a sports car is, you know, middle of the road, quite good, impressive figures, when most other cars were putting out around like 45 brake, you know, in your more economy cars. So, you know, it is decent, and it's a very good kind of learner car. You know, if you want to jump into classic Ferraris and you want to get used to the characteristics and how to drive them, you know, the fact that these have got no turbo, it's all just, you know, raw engine, you know, you've got the engine in the back sort of thing, then for me, this is one of the best places to start in terms of, you know, driving these Ferraris in Gran Turismo 7. And I think it's just a look back on the history of Ferrari, you know, one of the most, or if not the most prestigious brand in terms of, you know, motorsport and cars in general. You know, everybody at some point in their life wanted to own a Ferrari. I'm pretty sure of that. I mean, I know I'd absolutely love to. I don't care what kind of Ferrari it was, just to have that kind of, you know, stallion badge, you know, sat on my steering wheel as I jump in the car would just be an absolute dream come true. And I feel like most people are like that. They're all, you know, poster cars, elegant looking, and, you know, Ferraris from this time are just absolutely cool and pretty much timeless. It just goes to show you, you know, you can have a car that's an absolute handful without a ridiculous amount of power. You can have an engine at the rear, you can have awesome looks, awesome sounds, all in one, without it kind of being overkill. And that's just what I absolutely love about this car. For me, it kind of embodies that sort of modest Ferrari. You know, when we've got cars like the F40 in the game, the F50, all the modern Ferraris, this one kind of just gets left out, and I feel like it deserves that chance. And that's why, you know, when I've driven this over, you know, quite a few miles at this point, believe it or not, but I really kind of just sort of fell in love with it, not just for its simplistic looks and, you know, typical Ferrari looks, but just everything about it. There's just, sometimes you'll jump in a car in Gran Turismo 7 and you'll think, you know what, there's just something about this car that I really do enjoy. And this is that kind of car to me. You know, sometimes you can't quite put your finger on exactly what it is. You know, it could have so many flaws and so many things wrong with it, but for some reason you just find yourself enjoying it. And that's kind of the main thing here. It's a joy to just get used to, you know, kind of reel it in and just kind of get, you know, pure driving pleasure out of this car. So I did say it sounded good, and in my opinion it really does. So have a listen to this. So now let's go on to the interior of this car, and well, it's not really in your face, there's nothing absolutely stand out about it, but in my opinion there is, and for me that is just the wheel itself. Seeing that kind of Ferrari logo just right in front of your face as you ride on board with this car, it's just absolutely awesome. It's kind of a feeling like no other. You just feel like you're in what essentially is one of the best kind of most prestigious car brands available. So overall, in terms of our sectors, there they are. We did an overall time of an 8-minute 26.491, which is not fast at all in terms of, some of the cars we've run around the ring, but it's kind of very respectable. So overall, it comes 10th in a 500 pp category, just ahead of the classic Maserati, which was added in one of the updates, and just below a Volkswagen Scirocco R from 2010 by around about 4 seconds. So a very kind of middle of the road car. I feel like if we didn't have that traction on it, it would probably saved us a good few seconds throughout. However, this car is just an absolute handful, even from standard. So it definitely requires a lot more kind of getting used to than these reviews really kind of allow me. So obviously, as always, we go for the most mental version of this car. And well, we threw a wide body on, some BBS wheels, and put some insane camber on it. Now, I know that's not to everyone's taste, but I personally think classic Ferraris with that kind of stance look just look absolutely awesome. I feel like it just kind of complements the shape of these cars, making them wider, making them more aggressive, but kind of keeping that sleek original design. And that's kind of what I wanted to aim for here. So we made it as kind of mental as we could, and we went and hit up the high speed ring. So it was a lot more kind of responsive than the standard version. It was also a lot quicker at accelerating. In terms of top speed, we hit around about 170 to almost 180 mile an hour as we went down into the left-hander after the kind of main straight part and the big curve banking at high speed ring. So I wasn't really expecting too much from this. However, one thing that really did surprise me is just the amount of grip this thing had through the corners. It was still a bit of a handful, but it was so responsive and went exactly where I wanted it to that I just couldn't believe it at the time. I was really kind of just driving this thinking, right, this car should not be reacting this well. Surely, I've accidentally added on something I shouldn't. But no, I was wrong. I went and checked all the settings. I hadn't really fiddled with them. They were just kind of straight out of the box, fully modified. And all of a sudden, it just became a full-blown race car. Now, I didn't want to add a spoiler on it. I get it would have kind of added stability through the corners or, made it even more planted. I wanted to keep that original look. But even without the spoiler, it just felt so at home on a racetrack, which was very kind of weird and just unexpected. So we've kind of transformed a middle of the road Ferrari into an absolute track day monster, and it really did feel good to kind of just nail this car down and get it right without any major tweaks or anything like that. The fact that I can get this out at standard, and hit the high speed ring up and feel like I'm doing very well is definitely a credit to this car. So I thought I'd do a few celebratory donuts and then we'll go ahead and check out where this car happens to go on our lap time leaderboard. So overall, we did a 1 minute 12.893, which is a very respectable time for this car. There are the individual sector times if you are into that kind of thing. So let's go and have a look where overall it comes on our modified lap time leaderboard. And overall, it comes 10th out of 13, which is much better than I actually thought. I actually thought this had probably just been ahead of the Pontiac GTO, but just behind those Porsches. But it's actually quicker than a fully modified 993 from 1995 and a fully modified 964 from 1992, and it's only just slightly slower than the Club Sport from 1995. So a very impressive lap time for our modified leaderboard. So that is going to be it for today's video. I just thought I'd kind of, bring these car reviews back and kind of showcase these cars that probably most people don't even bother touching, that really do deserve a bit more kind of attention or credit. And like I said, this is one of those cars that I genuinely enjoy, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Why? Because everything basically goes against this car being so good. It's not a standout Ferrari, it's not really a standout car in the game, but I feel like just those classic, elegant, sleek looks and, just the awesome way it sounds and just feels, just kind of gives you that ultimate driving pleasure within GT7. So massive shout out to all my channel members. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Turn those notifications on so you don't miss a single bit of content from myself. Thank you so much everyone for your support recently, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.